A letter from the Vatican arrives in New York as Donald Trump prepares for the day. He's asked to attend Pope Francis' funeral at St. Peter's Basilica. Memories of a past encounter with the Pope bring him here now. During a quiet moment alone, Trump begins a search for forgiveness that changes how he feels deep inside. News spreads fast before sunrise. The world learns the Pope has died. The announcement isn't just headlines or rumors. It's spoken softly by the Vatican's press secretary from the steps of St. Peter's. In the morning light, the square grows still as the bells sound slow and steady. Their deep tones echo across Rome's narrow streets, spreading like gentle ripples. Far away, in New York, the city still sleeps. When Donald Trump sees the alert on his phone, he looks at the headline once, then again. For a moment, he just sits there. The quiet hum of traffic below him mixes with the dull sheen of the penthouse fixtures under a gray sky. It's been years since he thought deeply about the Pope. It's been years since that private meeting at the Vatican. When Trump was president, the world watched him shake hands with the smiling, quiet pontiff. Both men symbolized very different kinds of power. The Pope had said little then, but his words stayed with Trump longer than he expected. Pope Francis had softly said, "It's not for lifting yourself above others. It's for kneeling beside them." Trump nodded, smiled, and said what he thought was right. Later, as months and years passed through campaigns, losses, loud moments, victories, and injured words faded into the background. They were pushed aside by needs and pressures, until now. This morning, at last, he receives a formal invitation. It arrives 3 hours later. A simple message from the Vatican. Only a few former and current leaders are asked to come, not for shows or alliances, but because the Pope wanted it. Even after his death, Pope Francis aimed to build a bridge. Trump holds the heavy cream-colored envelope in his hand. Inside, written in the elegant style of Vatican script, are the words, "You are invited to honor the life of His Holiness Pope Francis, shepherd of the faithful, defender of the poor, friend of the wayward. May you come with humility and leave in grace." Trump leans back in his chair. No one is forcing him. No one will blame him if he says no. Many expected him to refuse. He's not known for being deeply religious. Still, something pulls at him. A weight he can't explain. A memory that isn't politics. It's older, quieter. It's like the way his mother used to pray at her bedside. Her Bible was worn from years of use. As a boy, he listened but didn't fully understand. Still, he felt there was something bigger than him. Something just beyond their humble home. He folds the invitation carefully. Then he stands and walks to the window. Outside, he looks over the city he has spent his life trying to master. Today, it looked smaller, almost fragile, as if it was pausing to remember what truly mattered when everything else faded away. He decided quietly, without fanfare or announcements, that he would go. The trip to Rome was organized in private press. No shouting, just a small jet and a few staff who knew better than to speak unless spoken to. Most of the flight was silent. He gazed out at the clouds stretched below, like old, worn fabric. He had traveled millions of miles in his life going to conferences, rallies, summits, but this journey felt different. It wasn't about making a point or impressing others. It resembled a pilgrimage, a search for something he couldn't name, but sensed he'd lost somewhere along the way. Rome received him with gray skies and slick streets from an early rain. Vatican guards in black suits quietly led his motorcade through narrow alleys to the Apostolic Palace. People lined the route, but they were silent, not shouting or cheering. Many held rosaries or candles, their eyes red from mourning. Trump kept his gaze steady. He wasn't there to be seen, he was there to see. At the gates of St. Peter's Basilica, he stepped out alone. Inside, cameras weren't allowed, no microphones recorded every breath. Just him, a man among men, a soul among souls. The inside of the basilica felt like another world, thick with incense, cold stones underfoot, towering columns fading into shadow far above. Candles flickered over marble floors, tiny flames bowing in the drafts that slipped through cracks. Choirs sang softly in Latin, their voices drifting like smoke among the arches. At the far end of the nave, Pope Francis' body rested on a simple wooden bier, covered in white linen. No crowns, no royal jewels, just a silver cross on his chest and an old Bible at his feet. Trump moved slowly, footsteps muffled by the vast space. Other leaders had gathered, presidents, prime ministers, kings, but he barely paid them attention. He saw only the man who once talked to him about power, not as a weapon, but as a duty. Now that voice was gone, or maybe it was louder than ever. When it was time for each leader to give a blessing, they approached the bier one by one. Some bowed, some crossed themselves, others silently prayed. When it was Trump's turn, he hesitated. No one told him what to do. No one pushed him forward. He moved on his own, each step heavy and deliberate. He knelt before the symbol rail beside the bier. The outside world blurred away its noise. Victories, fights, none of that mattered now. He closed his eyes. For the first time in decades, long before politics or skyscrapers or headlines, prayed. Not for success or favors, not for protection. He asked for forgiveness, for mercy, for the small, unseen choices he made without thinking of who they affected. He asked for grace steadily behind something that mattered, not just tall and shiny, but good. He prayed for strength to kneel more often, not before men, but before the quiet truth that no one outruns their own soul. He prayed for the child inside who believed in wonder, for the mother who once prayed for him even when he didn't deserve it, for a world hurt by power, careless and rough, including himself. When he stood again, something shimmered behind his eyes. It wasn't weakness or defeat. It was something else, something unspoken, something he would carry long after the incense faded and candles expired. It all started with silence instead of words or signatures. Heavy clouds hung over Rome that morning. The sun never found a clear path through the thick gray sky. When the funeral procession moved, a thin mist spread across St. Peter's Square. Colors of flags blurred, and the shine of swords and polished shoes softened by the damp air. Donald Trump stood among global leaders, wearing a heavy black coat. His hair lay flat from the moist air. The funeral mass was straightforward. No big shows or loud speeches. Just gentle Latin prayers echoed softly in the ancient space. The sounds seemed to wrap around the mourners like old songs. Trump listened, but not just with his ears. Something deeper connected with him, something uncomfortable. Rows of chairs laid out in the square. Trump sat quietly, hands clasped as the readings began. Blessed are the meek, the words echoed. He shifted slightly. The phrase felt strange against his instincts. Success had never come from meekness. It hadn't built empires or won elections. It hadn't faced rivals across polished tables. Yet now, those words didn't seem weak. They felt true. As the homily started, Trump looked out over the crowd. He saw men and women in black coats, heads bowed, gathered around a simple white casket. Near it, a Paschal candle flickered, stubborn against the wind. To lead is to serve, the priest's voice said. Trump caught a tightness in his throat he didn't expect. The square felt bigger than before, filled with centuries of history. Great men had walked, era kings, poets, emperors. Many had been forgotten. Some remembered for kindness, not fame. His mind drifted to childhood memories. In Queens, he had listened behind a door as his mother prayed for her children. He remembered how her voice shook when she spoke of kindness, not success. Still, he had chased success, ending up in the highest offices, in shiny towers, in rooms where his name was both feared and admired. But that hunger never went away. The ache in his chest stayed silent. The priest's steady voice broke the silence. Remember, you are dust, and to dust you will return. The breeze shifted again. Trump closed his eyes. For a moment, he was just a man. No titles, no wealth, no fame, just a soul walking in shadows. They carried Pope Francis' body to its final rest. Leaders followed at a respectful distance. Trump moved with them, uneven stones guiding his steps. No words were spoken, only the bells sounded deep and slow, ringing through old stone halls. The air was filled with the soft noise of many steps, passing statues and fading frescoes. Trump wondered how many men had believed themselves eternal here, how many had learned too late they were just dust. At the crypt, a last blessing was said. Then each leader took a moment alone. Trump watched as kings and presidents bowed. Some crossed themselves, others whispered quiet words. When it was his turn, he paused only briefly. He stepped closer, one bare hand on the cold marble. Quietly, so only heaven could hear, he whispered, "Help me remember what matters." There was no sudden light or loud noise, only the quiet sound of a man starting to pray. He turned away, blinking quickly to clear the sting from his eyes. Outside, the sky darkened. Thin rain drummed steadily on the ground. Rome seemed to cry, and deep inside Donald Trump, something long frowning began to melt slowly. The Vatican gardens were not open. Trump had no plans to visit them. After the funeral ceremonies, he had quietly been taken to a small guest house nearby to rest before the long trip home. But rest was impossible. He stared out the window of his small room, at the tangled beauty beyond the stone wall. There were ancient olive trees, bright bursts of bougainvillea, and quiet fountains whispering secrets. Something pulled at him. He shrugged into a dark coat, left instructions for privacy, and slipped outside through a side door. The air smelled heavy with wet stone and blooming jasmine. The paths twisted through archways and crossed small footbridges. Trump wandered aimlessly, hands deep in his pockets. The mist softened everything around him. For once, no one recognized him. No cameras, no assistants, just a peaceful place made for thought, not show. As he turned a corner near an old moss-covered bench, he saw a figure sitting alone, an old man in simple black robes, a silver chain shining at his chest. The man raised his eyes and smiled gently, motioning for Trump to sit beside him. The gesture, so simple and free of pressure, made Trump follow. He sank heavily onto the bench opposite the man. They sat quietly for a moment, neither speaking. Nearby, a fountain burbled softly, like an ancient song without words. Then, the old man spoke in a gentle, slightly accented voice. "You prayed." Trump tensed a little. He asked defensively, "How would you know?" The man chuckled softly. "Those who listen for prayers hear their echoes." Trump stayed quiet. The man pressed on. "Many come here wanting to be noticed, wanting importance." He looked straight at Trump. His gaze was sharp, but not mean. "Those who truly matter come not for recognition. They come to remember who they are." Trump shifted on the bench. "And who am I?" he challenged. The old man smiled. "A man," he said simply. "No more, no less." Trump breathed out sharply and laughed quietly. "That's not what the world says," the man answered softly. "The world's loud, but the truth is quiet." They sat in silence again. After a while, Trump spoke haltingly, about ambition, about battles he fought and lost, about their costs. The old man listened patiently, hands folded peacefully in his lap. When Trump finished, the man nodded. You've built much, he said. Now it's time to build what can't be seen. Trump looked confused. What do you mean? He asked. The soul's strength, the man replied. Kindness, mercy, humility, these are higher than any steel or glass tower. Trump looked away, feeling a tightness in his throat. The old man slowly got to his feet. Joints creaking, he placed a hand briefly on Trump's shoulder and said, "The Pope prayed for you." Trump's head shot up. Not by name, but in spirit. The old man explained that he prayed for those carrying heavy burdens. He hoped they would learn to carry them rightly. His face grew softer, deeper lines around his eyes. You're not as far off as you think, he said. Then he turned and slowly disappeared into the mist, walking down the path. Trump sat quietly for a long time. After the bells stopped ringing and the rain turned to a soft drizzle, he remained in place. When he finally stood up, something inside him had changed. Not completely, not suddenly, but enough to make him choose the longer path home. Enough to notice things he'd never seen before. For the first time, he saw the tiny, fragile flowers blooming unseen between the cracked stones of the old courtyard. It was a small sigh, a sign that something was starting to shift. This time, it was different. He intended to make the long journey back alone. The rain lessened to a whisper by evening, leaving the cobblestones slick and gleaming under faint lantern light in the Vatican courtyard. Inside his small room, Trump sat at a narrow desk. A folded invitation to the funeral lay next to a worn leather Bible, carefully placed by a nearby attendant. The air smelled faintly of incense and damp stone. He hadn't really opened a Bible in years, not like he used to as a boy. Back then, he would trace the edges of the pages with small, curious fingers, while hearing his mother's gentle voice in their simple home. Back then, faith was simple. It was woven into daily life, not something debated or performed. Now, in this quiet room far from Queens, he opened the Bible again. The pages rustled softly, like whispers. He flicked it open naturally, unsure what he was searching for. His gaze fell on a verse he hadn't thought of in a long time. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. The words seemed to glow faintly on the thin paper, fragile and quiet, yet steady, like a lighthouse guiding through darkness. He stared at the verse, feeling a strange stir inside him that he couldn't quite name. Without overthinking, he jotted it down on a small notepad by the phone. His handwriting was rough and unfamiliar. Writing it felt strange, but necessary, like holding on to something real. The next morning, before the city stirred, he left his room. He headed to St. Peter's Basilica. The square was nearly empty, cloaked in mist. A few pilgrims knelt or stood silently, lost in prayer. There were no cameras, no reporters, and the ancient stones and quiet respect filling the air. Guards at the gate recognized him but said nothing, letting him pass. Inside, the basilica stretched out vast and quiet. It felt alive with sacred stillness. The marble columns reached upward like a forest. Candlelight flickered softly across the gleaming floors. Trump moved slowly, drawn toward the altar, where Pope Francis had celebrated many masses. His steps echoed in the empty space. He hesitated briefly before kneeling. At first, it felt awkward, stiff, and unfamiliar. He bowed his head and pressed his hand lightly on the cool stone. He stayed like that for a long moment, breathing deeply. The weight of everything settled over him. Then, quietly, he began to speak. God, he started, his voice catching slightly. If you're listening, and I think maybe you are, I'm not here to make a deal. He paused, trying to find the right words to say what was in his heart. I'm not here to ask for a win or fame. I'm here because I forgot. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of what matters. I forgot what it means to be small. The words came out haltingly at first, but once they started, he couldn't stop. I forgot what gratitude means. I forgot how to trust someone besides myself. I forgot what it means to kneel. His voice cracked on the last word, and he let it hang in the quiet air. He remembered his mother's prayers, the ones she whispered late at night when she thought no one was listening. He thought about how small that life was, simple, quiet, and full of love. She never cared if the world knew her name. She just loved in her own way. Help me, he whispered silently. Help me remember. Help me be the man she prayed for. The man this world still needs. Not the loudest, not the strongest, but the right one. The silence of the basilica wrapped around him like a forgotten lullaby. Holding him gently, a few tears slipped down his face, hot and real, with no one around to see or stop him. No one recorded this moment. No one asked for a speech or a signature. He stayed until his knees hurt, and his body trembled from the cold coming up through the marble floor. When he finally got up, he felt different, not reborn, but changed, like a ship slowly turning toward a distant shore it had long ago lost sight of. As he moved toward the large church doors, he saw an old nun lighting candles in a small side chapel. She looked up and gave him a quiet, knowing smile, not one of admiration for wealth or power, but a simple gesture shared between fellow travelers. He nodded back, voice gone because of the lump in his throat. Outside, for the first time in days, the sun was just beginning to peek through the clouds. Its golden rays fell across the wet stones. Trump pulled his coat tight, stepping forward, feeling the warmth brush his face. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't fame. It was something softer, something steadier, like a quiet invitation to start walking down a new road. And for once, he felt ready. The flight back to New York was silent. Trump Saturday by the window, staring out at the Atlantic. The sunset turned the sky in shades of orange and violet, casting long shadows over the clouds below. He barely ate what the crew brought. He hardly noticed their checks and questions. He wasn't angry. He wasn't planning. He was thinking, deep inside, about something he couldn't quite name. When the plane landed at JFK, the city sparkled in the winter night. Lights flickered all around. New York had always been his battle, his home, his stage, but tonight, it seemed smaller and quieter. He moved quickly through the airport, turning down press and empty statements. His team had prepared a speech, something respectful and serious, but he set it aside without a word. Instead, he went home. Trump Tower's gold and marble shone as usual. Still, now even those well-known features seemed less bright. As he rode up to his penthouse, he studied his reflection in the mirrored walls. He saw the same sharp suit, the same focused eyes. But something was softer now. Like the first cold thaw of winter, the first few days back, he stayed quiet. Meetings were cancelled. Interviews turned down, not because he planned it, but because he wanted it that way. He found himself waking early, sitting by the bay windows with a cup of black coffee, watching the city wake up. He sometimes opened the small leather Bible he had brought from Rome. Inside, he had written a verse on a small piece of paper. Make in me a clean heart, O God. Renew a right spirit within me. At first, it felt foolish, then it felt less so. One afternoon, he called his son Baron into his study. The boy had grown taller and carried himself with quiet confidence. He moved through the world as if untouched by its weight. Trump looked at him for a long moment before he spoke. Your grandmother, he finally said, used to pray for me every night. I didn't fully get why back then. Baron stayed silent. Sensing how serious this was, "I believe," Trump added. "She prayed because she knew something I didn't. She understood that no matter how strong you think you are, you can't shoulder everything alone." Trump handed Barron a Bible. "This isn't about weakness," he said. "It's about knowing when to kneel." Barron carefully turned the pages, his face unreadable, but when he nodded, Trump felt a strange release in his chest, something he hadn't even realized he was holding inside. Over the next days, small things began to change. He made an unexpected call to an old rival, not to stir up trouble, but just to wish him well when a family member was sick. He showed up unannounced at a small church food pantry in Queens, without cameras or notes. He spent an afternoon stacking cans and shaking hands with people who didn't care about polls or headlines. He left an anonymous handwritten note and a check to cover a worker's medical bills. No one saw it. No one needed to, but it mattered. Slowly, those close to him noticed the difference. His staff started to quiet down. Their movements became calmer. His family gathered a little closer at mealtimes. His heart, though still full of fire, carried a new sense of humility. A quiet grace ran through his old ambitions. At night, sometimes, he'd walk to his balcony. He'd stare at the city that once seemed like the whole world. It was still huge, still glowing, but now he saw that the biggest fights aren't on stage or in meetings. They happen quietly through prayer and the choice to kneel, even when no one's watching. He learned to love what couldn't love him back, to build something unseen, brick by brick. He's not perfect. He still has old habits, sharp words, moments of pride, but the seed was planted. Each day, he watered it with small acts of kindness, quiet prayers, and a humility learned not by losing but by letting go. Months later, when asked about his trip to Rome, Trump simply smiled and said, "It reminded me that sometimes the greatest things we build aren't made of steel. They're made of grace." The interviewer sensed that something was different but couldn't tell what. His family, old friends, even some rivals saw it too. Maybe that simple change was enough. The Pope's final prayer had reached him, not through fireworks or show, but through a small ripple, a prayer born in a basilica at dawn, carried across the oceans and planted deep in his heart. He remained willing to listen, still willing after everything to kneel,